It's week 13. It's Jesse Rubinoff. It's Donovan Bennett. No Andy McNamara today, but we are going to have you for the next hour talking about all things fantasy football related before we get to the NFL. And I know there are questions rolling in already. DJ, first of all, excellent job last week on Tim and Friends. And I know the hard work for you always continues. And you had a Vanier Cup broadcast yesterday. That's why you're wearing the Western Mustang shirt. I am a Western grad as well. So
Let's go.
Western Vanier Cup champions. Let's go. Mustangs. So he's getting up. He's got some paraphernalia. There you go.
All right.
There you go. So how was
those Mustangs?
How was the broadcast yesterday? How was the game? Did you enjoy yourself before we get to how did you stay unbiased is probably the best question to ask.
I didn't. Is the answer to the question. I might just bust out in a fight song right now. It was a great game. Great for the Stinks to win, obviously, but it was awesome to work with Andy Petrillo and Jesse Lumsden. And kudos to U of S, the Huskies. They love their football in the prairies, and they had a great year. And Scott Flory has taken over and taken that program to quick heights really, really fast. And so they're ascending, and I'm sure they're going to be back. But the GOAT, as far as I'm concerned, Greg Marshall gets another Vanier Cup championship.
It's ridiculous.
He's won as a player. He's now won two as a coach. He's won as an assistant coach. He's done everything in football. And so it's a good day to be a Sting.
A lot of really big fantasy performances in the Vanier Cup. Also got the CFL games today, East Division and West Division final. Bit of a circus earlier in the week as it pertains to the Toronto Argonauts situation with McLeod Bethel Thompson. But this is an NFL show, and it is week 13 in the National Football League. A lot of very intriguing storylines. One I want to get your opinion on first and foremost before we get to the questions. Looks like Kyler Murray is finally going to be back. This is a guy who was probably a front runner earlier in the year for an MVP award, but he's missed a bunch of games here. He's back in the lineup today. It looks like DeAndre Hopkins is also going to be back, although Adam Schefter did report earlier today that it appears DeAndre Hopkins might be limited a little bit because he's had a nagging ankle injury for a very long time now, and it's been very frustrating for fantasy managers because it feels like he's been a game time decision in every single game for the last 4 weeks. So you have DeAndre Hopkins sitting on your bench. He's ready to go, but he might be limited. What do you do with DeAndre Hopkins?
So this is going to sound odd because I am actually more confident that Kyler Murray is going to have a good game because Hopkins is up. But I would still be very careful in playing Hopkins, especially if you've got some other top flight receivers that give you an option and maybe another option in your flex. Here's why. I think, one, a lot of Kyler Murray's value is baked into his ability not just to throw but to run. And they have held him out to make sure that he is not only able to go from a health standpoint, but that he's able to go from a cardiovascular standpoint because he is someone who's scrambling around, running often. So I expect to see as close to 100% Kyler Murray as possible. Nobody is 100% after training camp. Quite frankly, after he played football for 1 or 2 years, nobody is ever 100% again.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a war of attrition, but I really like Kyler Murray. And I also like Kyler Murray more because Hopkins is playing. Because you know where Hopkins is not going to be on a pitch count? You know where he's not going to be limited? In the red zone and specifically goal-to-go area where he is such a threat on fade routes. And so if I got a nice red zone target for Murray in Hopkins back up and in the lineup, great. I love it, right? That increases his value. However, a wide receiver who is not going to be playing a full complement of snaps is a dangerous proposition. We saw it on Thursday with Amari Cooper. Many people were like, great, Amari Cooper's back. He's back up. Oh, great. Okay, I'm going to put him in the lineup, even though we heard reports earlier in the week that he was going to be playing on a limited basis. And so he didn't have the same value as Michael Gallup, for example, a CeeDee Lamb. And so I look at Hopkins in the same way, an offense with lots of mouths to feed. I think they will keep him, relatively under wraps until they really need him and they're in the score zone.
Yeah, well, let me full disclosure. I have DeAndre Hopkins in one of my leagues, and the other options here are Tyler Lockett and Clyde Edwards-Helaire for basically a flex position. And I'm looking at Hopkins, and one of the things that you just said is probably why I'm going to start him, and that's a red zone situation because I think I'm going to start Clyde Edwards-Helaire over both of them. But then it becomes a Lockett or DeAndre Hopkins situation, and we've all seen what's happened to the Seattle Seahawks offense lately. They can't score. And even if usually it used to be, okay, 1 week's a Tyler Lockett week, the next week's a DK Metcalf week. Well, suddenly there's none of them. Russell Wilson is a shell of his former self. And unfortunately, the Seahawks offense isn't producing. So, yes, when you have the opportunities inside the red zone that DeAndre Hopkins can get, big target. Kyler Murray likes to look for him down there. I think the upside is probably bigger there than Tyler Lockett, and I'm probably going to lean towards starting DeAndre Hopkins in that spot. Okay, let's get on with the questions here because nobody wants to hear about me and my team. They want to hear about what we think about their team. So Koala Bear Caleb on YouTube, regular.
Yes.
With Aaron Jones and Dante Foreman on a bye and DeAndre Swift injured. Pick 2 from my waiver selections. Kenyon Drake, Devontae Freeman, or Ty Johnson. I will say before, just to preface this, Josh Jacobs was questionable earlier in the week, constantly dealing with nagging lower body injuries, but it does look like Josh Jacobs is expected to play in this game. So Kenyon Drake, Devontae Freeman, or Ty Johnson for you, DJ?
It was pick 2, right?
Pick 2, correct.
I mean, I think in Baltimore, even though the lead runner in Baltimore is Lamar Jackson, I still think Freeman is on the field more than anyone else. That's a team that looks to run the ball, and so he's been so inconsistent, but he has had some touchdown luck, and so I would say Freeman, because of the Jacobs news and because of the fact that, when healthy, he is by far their lead rusher. I would go Ty Johnson in a Jets team that you're just hoping that the game script stays in his favor because if that game starts to get away from them, they've shown that they're not afraid to have their rookie quarterback throw it pretty often. And so I would say Johnson and just cross your fingers and watch the score and hope that it's close.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think Kenyon Drake, it looked for a little bit earlier in the season, sort of the midway point of the season, that he was stealing some of the thunder from Josh Jacobs. They were utilizing him more on passing downs, but that has sort of taken a backseat, and Josh Jacobs has become more of a bell cow. Devontae Freeman, I think that's a lock. You got to start him among these 3, which is hilarious because if you would have told me that week 13 we would be starting Devontae Freeman in this spot, given his age, given what we saw from him with the Falcons, but here he is, and he seems to be the most productive back in Baltimore. So yes, Devontae Freeman, and then Ty Johnson with the Jets going up against the Eagles today. I think this game is going to be a little bit more competitive than a lot of people think because it doesn't look like Jalen Hurts is going to play, and that means Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback. It's Minshew mania, Deej, and that means this game probably going to be a little tighter than most people would have thought. So I would go Ty Johnson and Devontae Freeman in that spot, Koala Bear Caleb. So why don't we shift there to the Eagles situation? Jalen Hurts not going to play today, ankle injury. Obviously had a very bad game last week, but Gardner Minshew steps in here. What can we expect from the Eagles offense? Are they going to just rely mostly on getting the ball to Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, or do you think they're going to trust Gardner Minshew to air it out a little bit here?
I think they're going to trust Gardner Minshew to air it out. We've seen historically when he had an opportunity in Jacksonville, it's not like the playbook shrunk. If anything, the playbook expanded. The question is, do you really trust him to be able to make smart decisions with the football week in, week out for a 16-game and now a 17-game season? That's why I don't think anyone has really looked hard at him as a starter. But, that magic in small sample size is somewhat real. He is, basically a millennial Ryan Fitzpatrick. where he can come off the bench, get hot for a little bit. But you want to be friends with benefits, but you don't want to get married. And so I think you can expect, especially if you're in a situation where you're streaming and looking for a quarterback because of injury or bye, I think you can expect him to put up pretty big points, and quite frankly, he's going to have to, because it's not like their defense has been great. So yeah, I'm pretty bullish that he'll have a big day. And so if you have an Eagles receiver, condolences, but if you have to play them, then I think you feel relatively good about it.
Yeah, I think what's really funny and what some people sort of lose sight of is that no less than maybe 3 weeks ago, there were whispers that Jalen Hurts was going to be benched for
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew. So to me, Gardner Minshew has just a little bit of upside. We've seen it when he was with Jacksonville. You take the reins off, he can scramble a little bit, so he accumulates fantasy points on the ground. He likes to air it out a little bit. Now, I don't think that the Eagles are going to abandon their game plan, which has been their game plan for basically the last 5+ weeks, which is establish the run. They really like to establish the run in Philadelphia. And when I'm looking at those two backs, Boston Scott was going to be questionable with an illness, a non-COVID related illness, but it seems like he is going to play. Boston Scott has just been stealing Miles Sanders' workload. Let's just call it what it is. People drafted Miles Sanders to have him as an RB2 this season. He hasn't been an RB2, and a lot of that has been because it's a clear committee in Philadelphia. Now, luckily for Sanders, Jordan Howard's not going to play today, but there's still Kenneth Gainwell. What I'm expecting today from the Philadelphia Eagles is Boston Scott mostly on early downs and in the red zone. So if you have Boston Scott, I would still start him over Miles Sanders, which sounds ridiculous, but that is where we are here at this point in the season. And as a fantasy manager, it's your job to react instead of rely on the expectations that you had during the draft. So Miles Sanders downgraded. Boston Scott, I still think he's going to be somewhere around a flex, but too many bodies, too many mouths to feed in Philadelphia. Okay, moving on. Joe on YouTube. Morning, guys. Need help in full PPR league. Start and sit for running back. I'm between James Robinson and Miles Sanders. There we go. And for quarterback, I'm between Tua Tagovailoa and Kyler Murray. Any help would be appreciated. So I'll take this one, Deej. For the running backs, James Robinson also banged up, heel and ankle injuries. So you're going to have to keep tabs on whether he is going to play. Right now, he's still trending towards a game time decision. If he's healthy, despite the fact that they inexplicably give touches to Carlos Hyde, I would still go James Robinson over Miles Sanders because Boston Scott is expected to play and he's going to eat into Miles Sanders' workload. For quarterback, this isn't much of a conversation for me, even though Kyler Murray hasn't been playing the last few weeks. When he starts, you got to play him. And Tua has been a good real-life quarterback lately, but never in his career has he been a great fantasy quarterback. So there's no question for me there. It's Kyler Murray over Tua Tagovailoa. What about you?
Same on both. And James Robinson was questionable last week. He ended up playing and playing well, and finished the game. So his status on the injury report, I think, is more of an ongoing thing rather than something that flared up that might cause him to miss time. And when we last saw Kyler Murray, we're talking about him as a potential MVP. Now, good luck if you can figure out who the MVP is going to be at this point.
Jonathan Taylor, baby.
It just might be. Can they give it to the Colts O-line? Like, just give it to all five of them?
Yeah.
But the point is that Kyler Murray, despite having receivers in and out of the lineup, despite being banged up himself, has been really good this year. And so I don't foresee an issue with him where he's going to come back to the pack, even if he reverts a little bit closer to his career mean. That's still well above the ceiling of what Tua has shown thus far as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, the only risk here is a re-injury risk, but I don't think they would be playing Kyler Murray if he was at real risk of hurting his ankle again. They've been holding him out for quite some time already. It just doesn't make any sense for them to start him if he wasn't very close to 100%.
In most scenarios and questions, I would hear that. But every time Tua takes the field, there's a risk of a re-injury risk. So
Correct.
in this scenario, that injury risk is just baked into having these type of quarterbacks.
Okay, let's get to some tough questions here. Matt Stifler on YouTube. Sit
Stifler's
one.
mom.
Sit one. Very nice. I teed you up. It was too perfect. I teed you up there. Sit one. Full PPR. Cordero Patterson, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Mike Evans, or Hollywood Brown. So some
Ooh,
heavy
ooh,
hitters here. 5 options. Got to sit
ooh.
one. Going into the year, I don't think people would expect Cordero Patterson to be in must-start territory like he is right now, but that's exactly where he is. James Conner, same thing. Don't think people were expecting much out of him this year. He's there. So this is a very difficult question, but
Give
that's
him to me
why we're
again.
here. That's why we have the show, to help people out with the difficult questions. It's Cordero Patterson, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Mike Evans, Marquise Hollywood Brown. Sit one, full PPR. Here we go. Matt, answer coming at
Uh,
you.
Mike. So not Mike Evans, because I think with Antonio Brown out, his target share gets even bigger. Oh,
That's
uh,
tough. You want me to take it
I
first?
think I think I might sit Hollywood Brown.
That's what
He
I'm going.
himself has
I
been
love
banged
it.
up. Lamar hasn't looked good.
Mm.
He's thrown to the opposition as much as he's thrown to his own team. And Hollywood has had a case of the drops over the last couple of weeks. So I think I would sit Hollywood Brown. And I'm not saying I don't think he's going to have a decent day, but I think of the people that you named, and I was taking a hard look at Patterson as well. But the people you named, I think there is less certainty that they have a pathway to points. Patterson or Brown, and I think Brown, given the way he's trending, both health and the way that offense is trending, I would pick him.
That logic's why we pay the big bucks. Cordero Patterson is a must start right now, no matter what. He's the only person on that Falcons offense that is producing. The only one, whether it's out of the backfield, whether he lines up as a receiver, doesn't matter. You have to start Cordero Patterson. Leonard Fournette scores touchdowns at will now, and there was a little bit of Ronald Jones eating into his workload. Doesn't really look like that's going to be much of a concern moving forward. Leonard Fournette clearly the better option in the backfield as of right now. James Conner, I mean, all he does is score touchdowns. That's all he does. And the Cardinals what I will say about James Conner, not to get sort of bearish on him because I still think he's going to produce, but when Kyler Murray is healthy, Kyler Murray becomes a little bit of a scramble into the red zone or design bootleg into the red zone type of threat. So I'm not 100% sure that James Conner is going to score with the same efficiency that he's been scoring with Kyler Murray out of the lineup. That being said, until there's that drop off and you can see it, I'm not necessarily sure that you should sit him. And Mike Evans, I mean, yes, he runs a little bit hot and cold from time to time, but the Bucs against the Falcons, they should absolutely destroy them. The Falcons defense can't stop the pass at all. And Hollywood Brown, you said it. Lamar has been struggling. 4 picks last week. Marquise has a case of the drops going. And it just seems like unless they hit that big one over the top, which has been hard to find for the Baltimore Ravens offense lately, I don't know where the points necessarily are coming from. And now Rashad Bateman's in the mix. I know he's been sort of disappointing since he started playing for the Ravens, but there's more mouths to feed there in the Ravens offense. So, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's sit Marquise Hollywood Brown there for Matt Stifler. Okay, Mike O on YouTube. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Mike. QB question: with Kyler Murray back, can I trust him on that ankle? Yes, that's the answer. You can. Should I be looking to play Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Carson Wentz, or Taylor Heineke? I mean, I look at Derek Carr, I look at Carson Wentz, I look at Taylor Heineke, all fine options. Russell Wilson, I would stay away from, which sounds ridiculous. It's like another case of the expectations changing from draft day to currently, but they're fine options, those other ones. But I expect a huge day from Jonathan Taylor. I don't expect much from Carson Wentz. And Kyler Murray, whenever he starts, you got to play him. You have to play him. He's a top 5 option no matter what. So in this spot, Mike, yes, you got to start Kyler Murray, in my opinion. Deej.
Yeah, I mean, I agreed. In terms of those other QBs, Wentz playing the Texans, who are the Texans, but they've been better of late, specifically defensively. All you have to do is put on that Titans tape to understand that their defense is playing much better. I would lean Carr. However, monitor the status of Waller the baller. If he doesn't have Darren Waller up this week, then Carr becomes a less intriguing play. But Carr actually has been a much better fantasy quarterback than he's been a real life quarterback.
Totally.
And so I would take a look at Carr, assuming Waller is playing.
Yeah, it looks unlikely to happen that Darren Waller will suit up today for the Raiders.
It was doubtful, right?
Yeah, it was doubtful. I can double check it here, but it looks like he has officially been ruled out now. So yeah, I would roll Kyler. I would roll with Kyler Murray there, and good options again. But when Kyler Murray starts, you have to start him. That's why you drafted him as high as you did. So roll with Kyler Murray. Carlos on YouTube. Who do I start, Lockett or Hopkins? Since it appears that Hopkins will have limited snaps. This is literally my fantasy conundrum here. This is
okay. Well,
why don't you
starting, Jesse?
Why don't you talk it out for me before I once again rehash sort of what my mind's going through right now?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing: the Seattle offense is atrocious.
It's so bad.
DK Metcalf fans want to pull out their hair and not color it like him because they're so frustrated. However, the one person in that offense who's getting consistent targets is Lockett. That's it. For whatever reason. They're not balanced at all for whatever reason. It's not like we're going to give 5 to Lockett and 5 to Metcalf. It's 10 to Lockett. And so I think, and I say this often, look at your projections. If you just need your players to hit their projections to win, I think Lockett is the safer play. If you need to have a big day, well, Hopkins could have 2 touchdowns and 2 receptions. And so I would say Hopkins would be the guy if you need to go above and beyond to catch your opponent, assuming that you both have had a Thursday game already in the books based off of who you're starting. So everything being equal, I actually would lean Lockett this week. But Hopkins might be the play if you need something spectacular. What's the actual decision? What is lined up right now on Jesse's fantasy team?
What is lined up right now is Tyler Lockett is on the bench. DeAndre Hopkins is starting. And the reason, and I said this off the top when we briefly discussed it, the reason is the red zone targets and my faith in Russell Wilson and the Seahawks offense scoring at all. They haven't scored. They barely scored the last 3 weeks, is at an all-time low. I haven't been this disheartened with Russell Wilson as a quarterback in a very long time. And you need a capable quarterback throwing a receiver the ball. Now you have Kyler Murray back for the Arizona Cardinals. Who does he like to look to in the red zone? DeAndre Hopkins. What scares me the most, and this is very concerning, is the Schefter report that Hopkins could be on limited snaps. Because as a fantasy manager, there is absolutely nothing worse than throwing on the game and seeing your star receiver or running back standing, helmet on the sidelines, looking like, why is he not in there? If his helmet's on, why is he not in there? Get in the game. And everyone freaks out and gets mad. That is very concerning for me. And it's why up until 1 o'clock, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to make up my mind. But as of right now, DeAndre Hopkins is currently in my lineup over Tyler Lockett. I will say, these questions, this is what makes fantasy, because it's basically a coin flip. When you have the uncertainty of someone having limited snaps, there's no way to rationalize it. We don't know how much DeAndre Hopkins is going to play. If that scares you, then start Tyler Lockett. But also come to grips with the fact that there's a chance DeAndre Hopkins scores 2 touchdowns. And it's probably a better chance than Tyler Lockett scoring 2 touchdowns. So your rationalization was great. And I feel like you've made that point numerous times over the course of us doing the show, is that you have to figure out what you want. If you want more boom potential, then you go for the red zone guy. If you don't, if you want a higher ceiling, you're probably going with Tyler Lockett. So that's a decision that Carlos is going to have to make. But as of right now, DeAndre Hopkins is in my lineup over Tyler Lockett. Yeah? You with me on the rationalization? Okay, good. Patrick Jandix on Facebook. Patrick Jandix on Facebook. Have a couple of things to take care of today. First, tight end position. Foster Moreau from Vegas, who is stepping in for Darren Waller, or Cole Kmet for the Bears. Which one should you play? Foster Moreau actually put together a pretty nice game last time Darren Waller was out of the lineup. He went for 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. I believe that was week 7 against the Eagles. Cole Kmet, I mean, it doesn't really matter who's under center. He's sort of carving out a bit of a role for himself. It looks like Andy Dalton will be starting for the Chicago Bears today. Held his own a little bit last week on Thanksgiving. But who you rolling with here, Foster Moreau or Cole Kmet, DJ?
Slightly Cole Kmet, because Andy Dalton does like him a check down to a tight end. Yeah. And so I expect him to be busy. What makes this close is, you did mention, Foster playing well in Waller's stead. And the other thing is, when you look at the matchups, Cardinals defense, although they're ravaged with injuries, has still been relatively good throughout the year. The Washington football team, although getting a little bit better, still not the defense we thought they would be. And so, the Raiders have a better matchups in terms of the defense that they're facing. But I would still lean slightly to Cole, because I expect Andy Dalton to have 18 completions and for none of them to be further than 10 yards downfield.
Yeah, I mean, the difficult thing when it comes to this is that the Arizona defense has been really tough against tight ends. The unknown of Foster Moreau, it's very difficult to sort of decide where you should slot him in, because he hasn't played very much. So when I look at this, I think I'm going to lean Foster Moreau, only because I think the upside is greater. And it comes back to the point you were making, that sometimes you got to look for that upside. And with Darren Waller, we know in that offense that the Raiders love to target tight ends. And just based on that one game alone, 6 completions, 66 yards, 1 touchdown. I like that play because I think the Cardinals defense is very stout and very tough against the tight ends. So I would roll with Foster Moreau. But again, a very sort of difficult decision to make, Patrick. That's question 1. Question 2, let's see if we can get a consensus on this one. A running back, pick 2. Leonard Fournette, Alexander Mattison, Antonio Gibson, Myles Gaskin. Already played Zeke. What a dummy, he says. Have a good Sunday. The show's awesome. Thanks, Patrick. And Donovan, damn your Western Mustangs team. Go Riders, go. Okay. Hey. So thank you, Patrick, for those 2 questions. Let's get to the second one here. Leonard Fournette, Alexander Mattison, Antonio Gibson, Myles Gaskin. I'm going to go ahead and rule out Myles Gaskin right away, because although he is pretty solid RB2, I think these 3 options are significantly better. So the question really is between Fournette, Mattison, and Gibson. In my eyes, pick 2 of them, DJ.
It's the first 2, because they are one, they're the better players this year. I think Gibson has been great in flashes in the past, but he hasn't had consistent workload this year. He doesn't have a great offensive line or a great offense, and so if you are, I feel oddly the same way about Patterson as I do about Gibson. Some people see the name and can't just get over the fact of what the scenario is right now. We could throw Miles Sanders in that conversation, right? Gibson is no longer an RB1. Now, we could talk about whether or not it's because of his shin, or because he wasn't that good in the first place, or because the offense is terrible, or that they're not utilizing him correctly. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. He's not an RB1 at this point. He's really not even been an RB2 on good teams. And so I wouldn't put him in the conversation of Mattison, who's proven when he has been the lead guy to be an RB1, that the production has not been that far off what Cook has done in that offense. And so, and Fournette, I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. It could be 40 yards rushing or 4 TDs rushing, but he's someone that you got to put in your lineup at this point, because he has been the lead guy in that Tampa backfield.
I agree. I think it's Fournette and Mattison, and I think Gibson's a fine option. I think a lot of people watched what he did on Monday Night Football this week and came away thinking, wow, Antonio Gibson might be back. And that might be the case. But I still think Leonard Fournette and Alexander Mattison are better options. They're top 5 guys this week. Like, that's just a fact. They are top 5 options. Alexander Mattison, it seems like every single time he gets the RB1 role with Dalvin Cook out of the lineup, he produces. 4 times, the last 4 times Dalvin Cook's been out of the lineup, he has gone for over 130 yards. All 4 times. So Alexander Mattison, like, Dalvin Cook, it seems like he's always banged up. I'm not saying he's not a good running back. He's a good running back. But there is literally no drop-off here. It has been proven. There is no drop-off from Dalvin Cook to Alexander Mattison. So you have no choice but to start Alexander Mattison. And Leonard Fournette, I agree with you. The Bucs are making a concerted effort to get him involved, especially around the red zone. I like Fournette and Mattison here, notwithstanding the fact that Gibson is still a good option, but not in that upper echelon like Fournette and Mattison. Hopefully that helped, Patrick, and thank you, as always, for the questions, and sorry about our Western Mustangs. Keegan Lynn on YouTube.
Yeah.
Cam on bye, so do I play Big Ben? Oh, listen to these options, okay? And this is not it's not Keegan's fault. Cam's on a bye, so what are you going to do? Big Ben, Andy Dalton, Trevor Lawrence, or Gardner Minshew? Go for it.
So, Jesse, one of your astute questions when we were hosting Finn and Friends this week is you asked Michael Pinball Clemens, you were going against Hamilton Tiger Cats. They've been the dominant team in the East. What do you do against a juggernaut like that? And Pinball said, well, pray. And that's what I say to you, Keegan. Pray. Because with Cam on a bye, you should drop Cam at this point, based off of what we saw last week. And if you want to blame me, in your prayer confessional, sure, because I was in this very stream banging the table for Cam, and then I watched on Sunday and I changed my mind. And so any of those options would be better than Cam moving forward. In terms of who the best option is this week, I wouldn't be upset if you sprinkle a little on some Minshew magic, for sure. I mean, I think there might be still better options on the waiver wire, depending on the size of your league. I think Trevor Lawrence might be a better option, like week to week, if you take our advice and drop Cam. But yeah, I'm not too excited about Dalton as an option. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah. Look, Ben is not the same quarterback at all. He's just not. And sometimes he gets lucky by throwing a prayer to either Claypool or Deontay Johnson, catch and run. He's not the same guy, and I wouldn't trust him in fantasy at all. Andy Dalton, I watched the game last week on Thanksgiving, and what it felt to me was that was his ceiling. That is what he's going to do. And Darnell Mooney, yes, he had a nice connection with him, but they're not going to throw the ball that much. When he connects, it's going to be usually pretty short. So that felt to me like a 15, 16-point fantasy performance, felt like the ceiling. When I look at Trevor Lawrence, this has been arguably the most disappointing fantasy quarterback this season. And there's been a bunch of them. But Trevor Lawrence coming out of college, like, he was probably the most hyped prospect since Andrew Luck. And he comes in and has not performed to expectations. He hasn't had a multiple touchdown game in a very long time. The Jags stink. They're not good enough. Their offense isn't good enough. His receivers are not good enough. Marvin Jones Jr., he's abandoned him. Laviska Shenault, nothing consistent there. They can't really establish the run, especially with James Robinson sort of banged up. I'm not expecting very much for Trevor Lawrence. That leads me to Gardner Minshew. And the reason, again, yes, do the Eagles love to pound the rock? Yes, they do. They love to run the ball. They love to do it, and I don't think today will be any different. But Minshew, was he a serviceable quarterback in fantasy when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars? Yes, most definitely. And I still have that in the back of my mind. So when I watch Gardner Minshew today, despite the fact that they're going to run the ball, I'm expecting some magic from him, and magic usually translates into fantasy points. So I would go Gardner Minshew over those other options because I don't think they have any ceiling that's even close to as high as what we can get from the Magic Man himself, Gardner Minshew. So Keegan, go Gardner Minshew there. Andy Gold on Twitter. Darrell Henderson, Boston Scott, Devontae Parker, or Rashad Bateman needs 2 with at least 1 running back. So the running back options are Darrell Henderson and Boston Scott. I'm just going to check this because I know Darrell Henderson still looking like a game time decision, dealing with a thigh issue. So you're going to have to scramble there. If Darrell Henderson doesn't play, your decision is going to be made for you, Andy. You're going to have to start Boston Scott. I might even start Boston Scott to begin with. Devontae Parker coming back from injury and Rashad Bateman. So needs 2 with at least 1 running back. Deej, what say you?
I would take 2 running backs. There you go. You asked for 1, I'll give you 2. Henderson, there's always a queue beside him. Hopefully he is up, but assuming he plays, and as Jesse mentioned, you're going to have to monitor it. I'll take Henderson and Scott. Bateman's projections in terms of what he's looking to produce in fantasy have been relatively high across sites this week, but I'm not taking the bait, man. I'm not going with Bateman. I'm not going with Parker because I want to see him back. He's always in and out of the lineup, it seems, due to health. I want to see him back and produce in that Dolphins offense, which fluctuates from week to week. So I think the safer play are the 2 running backs. You know they're going to get the ball. It doesn't matter what they're going to do with it. I don't know for certain what the target's going to be for Bateman and Parker.
I 100% agree. If Darrell Henderson plays, you gotta play him. Boston Scott as well. Devontae Parker, I would take a wait and see approach. And with Rashad Bateman, I mean, I've been on the Rashad Bateman bus this whole time. I think part of the issue is that Lamar has already established connections with Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, and they don't throw enough to warrant Rashad Bateman having a high enough ceiling. So despite his talent, despite that I think high things of him, and many people do, in that offense, in its current iteration, there isn't enough of a role for Rashad Bateman to play. So if Darrell Henderson plays, I would go Henderson and Boston Scott. And if not, I would then pivot to Boston Scott and Rashad Bateman because I just don't think you can trust Devontae Parker at all yet. Take a wait-and-see approach with him. JHay514 on YouTube. Standard League, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, or Devontae Freeman. So Miles Sanders, as disappointing as it gets in fantasy, we've already addressed it in this show, and I still expect Boston Scott to eat into his carries, if not Kenneth Gainwell as well. So for me, this is between Edwards-Helaire and Devontae Freeman, and to which I will say, with Jerick McKinnon being on the IR, I really I don't know if I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a real-life running back, but they will try and make an effort to get him involved in this game today, whether it be pass catching out of the backfield or 15 touches. I would go Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that spot.
Agreed. They've had the bye the Chiefs had. So that's another week of rest for CEH. There's some real question whether or not he's going to come back before the bye due to injury. Another week to implement him to their offense. Andy Reid is unstoppable after a bye. And, oh, by the way, the Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs have never lost to the Broncos. So, I'm somewhat bullish on the Chiefs tonight in a Sunday nighter where the spread is more than a touchdown. I think the Chiefs are going to play well, and they've made as you mentioned, a concerted effort to get CEH the ball. You watch Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and it's like, with more vision, that 6-yard run could have been 60.
Yeah.
But you still got 6 yards if you're a fantasy owner, which is not the end of the world. So I would take CEH.
This is not necessarily a fantasy-related question, but you brought up that sort of lack of vision, and what it looks to me a lot like is Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas right now. It just doesn't seem like the explosiveness or the vision is there. But with Clyde, I'm not sure you have any other real option. I mean, Darrell Williams performed well in his absence, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a high draft pick. It's a similar situation to Zeke in the sense that you have a lot of capital in this starter, and you got to give him a chance, and you got to see if he can make it work. So I feel like they're going to continue to try and get Clyde Edwards-Helaire involved. The Miles Sanders thing is like, honestly, it's one of the most frustrating things I have experienced as a fantasy manager, and I know a lot of people are in the same boat because it's not his fault. This is the thing that's really frustrating. It's like he is not performing well. When he gets the ball, it's 6 yards a carry, 7 yards a carry. Out of the backfield, he makes things happen. He's a talented back, but they just don't play him. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch. And I understand that you want to get fresh legs in there with Boston Scott, Gainwell, Howard, etc. But when a guy is averaging what Miles Sanders is averaging, play the man, no?
What you were describing, the usage of, or lack thereof, of Sanders, the health and usage of Gibson, the health of McCaffrey, the lack of burst of Zeke, the now lack of health of Henry. Your frustration is exactly why the calls for a zero RB strategy are going to continue into next season. This is why, because the real trend was not only running back in the first round, go running back in the first two. Go hard on RBs. There's so much depth at wide receiver, you can fill it out. And there are so many quarterbacks throwing for more and more yards that in a 12-team league, you're bound to get one that's pretty good. So the real thought was go so hard on those running backs, especially if they're every down. Hope you luck out and get a tight end. And if not, well, who cares? Because after the top 3 or 4, they're all the same. But the real difference is the running backs. But what you're seeing is if you put so much capital into that position, you can't really trust it. And so whether it's people like Bill Belichick or Kyle Shanahan, basically saying, I want to have a referendum on the running back position and hate on all of them, or it's poor, Miles Sanders. I mean, there's Chris Carson owners who have been crying for weeks, who spent
for years
early on him for years, yeah. And then there's people like me who thought I was going to outsmart the room and draft Mike Davis early because who else was going to get touches in Atlanta?
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
I think you, and your frustrations about Sanders is echoed not just by owners of him, owners by running backs from across the league. Unless you own a Cleveland Brown running back, you've been frustrated with your running backs at some point this year.
So let's just go through the top 4 consensus running back picks this year. Christian McCaffrey out for the year. Dalvin Cook probably not going to play until at least the fantasy playoffs and has been hurt earlier in the year. Derrick Henry.
Right. Also has a legal issue that is
also has a legal issue. Yes. Derrick Henry out for the year. Alvin Kamara hasn't played in 4 weeks now. I mean, it's just carnage. It's carnage, and it's very unfortunate for. It doesn't happen every year, but for fantasy owners and managers who drafted any one of those 4 guys, what you're expecting as a workhorse running back, and what you've gotten is an injury, and that is incredibly frustrating. Marcus on YouTube, full PPR start 2. T. Higgins, Sterling Shepard, who I don't even think is playing, Kendrick Bourne, or Elijah Moore. I mean, scrap heap here. T. Higgins, Sterling Shepard, who isn't playing, Kendrick Bourne, or Elijah Moore. What I will say about Elijah Moore is that with any other Jets quarterback other than Zach Wilson, you start him. Like, he became a definite fantasy starter. But unfortunately, with Zach Wilson, it doesn't work. I said last week's show, their completions for the year, 41%. And while it got maybe a fraction better, I still don't think you can trust anyone in the Jets offense with Zach Wilson because they are strictly asking him to be a game manager, and that doesn't bode well for Elijah Moore. T. Higgins, blow-up game last week, but by the same token, he's been inconsistent all year. With that said, I think of these options, you have to go T. Higgins just because of the talent and the fact that Joe Burrow is the best quarterback of all of them. I'd go Higgins and Kendrick Bourne here because Elijah Moore and Zach Wilson just hasn't been getting it done for me. What about you?
Yeah, so what I would do is I would make myself a risk sandwich. And so on the one side, I want a low floor or a high ceiling if I'm picking two. And I think Higgins gives you the ceiling. We saw what he did last week. We saw, receivers in that offense be explosive almost every week. Jamar Chase has come a little bit down back to the pack, which has given more opportunity to Higgins. And then, I want a low floor, and I do not expect Bourne to have a new identity and the Bourne identity to be giving you touchdowns all over the place
Yeah.
because he's finally got into the end zone. But he is someone who's going to be on the field for virtually every snap in that New England offense. He is someone that they, rely on to move the chains on third down. And so I give him, a long look just because I think the floor for him is relatively high and he's a safe play.
Sterling Shepard has, in fact, been ruled out just about 15 minutes ago, ruled out for the game today. So,
good reason
yeah,
not to play him.
good reason. Definitely good reason not to play him. But worth probably holding on to because when he is healthy, he's definitely a viable wide receiver 3 on your roster, depending on how deep your league is. Okay, El Duque 2K on YouTube. With Henderson likely out, do I go with Sony Michel or pick up Miles Sanders or Ramondre Stevenson? If Darrell Henderson doesn't play, Sony Michel is an RB1. That's it,
Yep.
because he's the only one that's going to get touches in that Rams backfield. And I know that Sean McVay really likes what he's seen from Sony Michel so far this year. Miles Sanders, we've already addressed it ad nauseum. It's incredibly frustrating. Start him at your own risk. And then Ramondre Stevenson is part of his own trifecta of a committee in the Pats backfield with Brandon Bolden getting the passing down work and Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson splitting the early down work. So if you're starting one here and Darrell Henderson's out, you got to go with Sony Michel, in my opinion here.
Yeah, assuming Henderson is out, you're starting Michel. If Henderson's in, I would look to Stevenson at that point. But if Henderson's out, Michel's the clear answer.
I still think Miles Sanders and Ramondre Stevenson both would be very good number one option running backs if they weren't part of just gross committees, like just disgusting committees that just break the hearts of fantasy managers everywhere. Because Ramondre Stevenson has been a revelation. Like, dude runs hard. He's been really good. But the problem is Damian Harris is also really good, and Brandon Bolden just plays every third down. So that caps his upside significantly. John on YouTube, full PPR, Nyheim Hines or Darrell Williams. This is a trouble spot here because they're both backup running backs. It's the fact of the matter. They're both backups. Nyheim Hines has been trending one way, and that has been down. And the reason is because Jonathan Taylor is the MVP of the league. Look, if he doesn't win it, I don't care. He's the MVP in my mind. It's not even a question. Jonathan Taylor should be the MVP this year. Nyheim Hines, wouldn't start him. Darrell Williams, I still think they're going to make an effort to get him involved in some capacity, probably in passing down work. I would go with Darrell Williams here.
I would as well. Listen, Hines, they wanted not only off the field, they wanted out of the building. Like, they were trying desperately to trade him to no avail. So that lets you know why he's trending down. Darrell Williams, I think the Chiefs' offense is going to be on the field more. So no matter who the back is, there's more opportunity for fantasy points from that offense. But we talked about CH and his health, whether it's another injury or another fumble, because remember he had a little bit of fumbleitis earlier in the year. I mean, if he's out of the game for whatever reason, Darrell Williams becomes the starting running back in that offense. Where, if Jonathan Taylor gets banged up, Hines is still a third down back, right? He's not going to be on the field, that much. Plus, when you bake into the fact that, as I said earlier, the Chiefs are running many more plays because of the tempo of their offense, even though they had some offensive struggles. I like Williams more.
Yes, we're in agreement there. Consensus for you, John. George on Facebook, ride with a banged up Daryl Henderson or go with Jerry Jeudy in the late game, full PPR. Thanks, guys. Love the show. Thank you, George. Appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. If Daryl Henderson plays, you go with Daryl Henderson because the Broncos, first of all, Teddy Bridgewater is incredibly banged up here. He's very banged up. He's going to play, but they're going to make an effort to give Javonte Williams the ball. He's probably going to have 30 touches because Melvin Gordon's also out. So I'm not sure you can trust Jerry Jeudy with such a banged up Teddy Bridgewater. If Daryl Henderson plays, you got to go with Daryl Henderson.
If he does, no question. And I know this question might be thrown to us because Broncos have the Chiefs and that defense and, the ability that people have had to make plays against that defense. That hasn't been the case over the last, 4 weeks.
Month, basically,
include the bye. They've been, a top 5 defense in football. So you saw what they did to the Cowboys. That's the first time they really did it against, a real offense. The Cowboys came in as the top offense in football. So I don't think that Judy's going to have a massive day just because he's playing the Chiefs this week.
Chiefs defense has allowed 17 points or fewer in 4 straight games. Let's get your quick opinion on that. So obviously they were an abomination earlier in the year, this defense. And the last 4 weeks, they've been quite good. To me, they're somewhere in the middle of this. Do you agree with that? Because I don't think they're the worst defense in the league, and they're certainly not as good as they've shown the last 4 weeks. They're sort of in the middle, are they not?
I think they're closer to, and we'll see because they've got a bunch of AFC West opponents coming up down the stretch. I think they're closer to what we've seen now, or sorry, I should say they can be, because I think it's not just about their defense. I think their offense has started to play complementary football. Their offense has stopped turning it over at such a high rate. The offense has made a concerted effort to run the ball, or if throwing, basically make them design runs by throwing things like bubble screens and hitches that are pretty safe but help you control the clock. And that defense is started to get healthy. Chris Jones is back and healthy and playing. They've moved him back inside where he should be as a defensive tackle now that they've got Melvin Ingram, who they brought through at the trade deadline. They've realized that you just can't play Sorensen ever in the back end, right? Like there's no reason ever to have him in passing downs. And so, Steve Spagnuolo has made, some adjustments, but that offense, I think, has helped that defense out a little bit. And instead of overreacting when the defense struggled and tried to outscore everybody, they've said, well, why don't we just protect that defense and keep them off the field and be a little bit more conservative. And once we give them a lead, then Spagnuolo can dial up those exotic blitz packages that he's known for, and they can start to rest the patcher, whereas they're really, really successful.
Very, very good point on the Chiefs offense, sort of turning a corner here. I will say Vic Fangio has sort of a long history with the Broncos of shutting down Tyreek Hill as best one can shut down Tyreek Hill. So I would look for Travis Kelce to have a big day today if the Broncos are going to sort of sell out to shut down Tyreek Hill. Just a couple more before we get to the rapid fire. Evan on YouTube is asking Jack Doyle or Evan Ingram full PPR. Evan, I got to say, the fact of the matter is here, they're both touchdown dependent tight ends. You're throwing up a prayer, so flip a coin, and whichever one scores a touchdown is going to end up being the better start. There's no rhyme or reason. Evan Ingram has had all the potential in the world and all the chances in the world, and it just hasn't panned out. So take your pick. I guess just based on talent, I would go with Evan Ingram. But it's tight ends. It's TE2s you're looking at here.
Yeah, I would agree. I would maybe, if I had to, give the slight edge to Ingram, only because when there is a tight end on the field, it's going to be him, whereas it's not necessarily always the case with Doyle. No, granted, he comes from an offense where, they will play some 2 tight end sets. So just because there's more tight end depth on that team doesn't mean he's necessarily coming off the field. But I think Engram is going to be the guy, when players are called for a tight end in that offense.
M. Jankovic on is asking, Devontae Parker is back. Start him or Jerry Jeudy? I believe you take a wait-and-see approach with Devontae Parker. This is Jalen Waddle's offense now in Miami. He just soaks up all the targets. And while it's nice to have Devontae Parker back on the outside, I'm not sure you can expect very much of him coming back. Very injury-prone. We talked about the re-injury risk. If anybody's a re-injury risk during the game, it's Devontae Parker. So I would go Jerry Jeudy despite the injury issues with Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, if Parker is up, I actually think Parker has more upside than Jeudy. As Judy's become more of a possession receiver in that offense. But if you need to know right now, slot Jeudy in and go do some chores because he's going to play. But if you're monitoring it and Parker ends up playing and you want some upside, I think Parker would be the person I'm more confident in to have big points today.
Ron on YouTube, touchdown only. Renfro against Washington or Patterson against the Buccaneers. Yardage points are very minimal. 4 points for touchdowns, 1 point every 50 yards, rushing or receiving. I know what Andy would say if he was here, because he is the biggest Hunter Renfro fan that exists, other than probably Hunter Renfro's family. But in my opinion, Cordero Patterson is just too big of a focal point for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense to sit him. He has earned every right of the RB1 value that he gets now. So despite the fact that Hunter Renfro is going to be an upside wide receiver 2 today, I'm still going with Patterson because there's a multitude of ways that he can score touchdowns for the Falcons.
Yeah, I think Hunter has a big day. I have him starting in my lineup, but the specific question of touchdown only leads me to Patterson because he can score touchdowns in multiple ways.
Yeah,
he can run it. Obviously, he can catch it both out the backfield or lined up as a receiver. He might get a touchdown as a returner at some point. That is not impossible. And so I think Patterson, if the emphasis in this league is so high on touchdowns.
Okay, let's do rapid fire here as we wrap up. Closing in on 12. It's 12:05 here, so let's do some rapid fires. Jared Van V on YouTube. Who should I start at the flex position? T.Y. Hilton, A.J. Green, Josh Reynolds, or Darius Slayton? No Shepard or Tony in the lineup for the Giants, which is why Jared includes Darius Slayton here.
Yeah, I would go A.J. Green specifically because we don't know, the full health of Watkins. So I'm staying away from T.Y. for a while. I think it's A.J. Green.
Yeah, I think it's A.J. Green as well. I mean, the other close option here, I think, would be Darius Slayton, but I would roll with A.J. Green, who's been a lot better than most people certainly were expecting coming into this year. Moin123 on YouTube. Start 2 PPR. Whew. This is tough for a rapid-fire question. Michael Pittman, Hunter Renfro, Jalen Waddle, or DeAndre Hopkins? Start 2 PPR.
So definitely Pittman, no question. So I'm putting him in there. The fact that it's PPR makes me lean Renfro a little bit and take D-Hop out of the conversation because I don't know how many snaps he's going to get. But Waddle is a bit of a beast. But let's say Pittman and Renfro, especially because Waller is out.
Yeah, I mean those 3 options. I would take DeAndre out of this immediately because of the limited snap count possibilities and PPR. You just don't know. He's been out for a while. I would go Michael Pittman and Jalen Waddle here personally. Although I understand that could come back to bite me because Hunter Renfro is probably going to soak up a bigger share of the offense with Darren Waller out of the lineup here. I would go Pittman and Waddle, but those are 3 very, very, very solid options. Moin123, and I would be confident starting any of them. Trent on Facebook, half PPR. Boston Scott, Pat Freiermuth, Dallas Goedert to replace. Oh, that's the first question. So half PPR, Boston Scott, Freiermuth, or Goedert, I believe is what he's asking for. Yeah, so Dallas Goedert with a 1 catch, 0 yards last week. Boston Scott is going to be involved. He is active today, and Pat Freiermuth. So I would go Boston Scott here, just because I think the Eagles would make a concerted effort to get him involved. Of those three, I'd go Boston Scott.
Yeah, if it was full PPR, I would say Freiermuth. But since it's only half PPR, I would say Boston Scott.
And then he asks, replace Hurts with Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, or Gardner Minshew. Despite what we were hyping up Gardner Minshew earlier, I think you got to go with Kirk Cousins just because his weapons are so much better than what Gardner Minshew has. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, go with Kirk Cousins there in that spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, essentially, when you take Kirk Cousins, you take two top 10, top 15 receivers in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I would, as much as I hate him as an actual quarterback, I would take Cousins.
Last one here, Michael Olson on YouTube. Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, or Damian Harris, half PPR. Mike Williams has been hot and cold all year long. Van Jefferson sort of carved out a wide receiver 3 role in that Rams offense. And Damian Harris is splitting work with Ramondre Stevenson. So a very difficult question here to close it out, DJ. Which direction are you going here?
I would still take Damian Harris. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, what you're asking is take a running back in a timeshare or a number 3 receiver. And I would still take a running back in a timeshare, especially on an offense that is pretty committed at running the ball as they protect their young quarterback in Mac Jones. So I'm taking Damian Harris.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Damian Harris is the way to go. I just think it's too much of a toss up as to what you're going to get from Mike Williams and Van Jefferson. It's a wide receiver 3, so the upside isn't necessarily there. I would go with Damian Harris. That does it for us today, Week 13. It's going to be another fun day of football. Obviously, you have the CFL Division Finals going as well. I know a lot of people jumped on the Hamilton Tiger Cats as soon as the debacle with the Argos took shape. But no matter what you're watching, whether it's CFL, whether it's NFL, enjoy it. And you can see the Western sweatshirt that Donovan's wearing. Congratulations again. I'm a Western grad too, so congratulations to both of us. Pleasure working with you all week this week, Deej, on Tim and Friends. And hopefully Andy will be back for Week 14, Hunter Renfro's biggest fan. So for Jesse Rubinoff, Donovan Bennett, if you guys have any questions, reach out to us on Twitter before kickoff. But for Jesse Rubinoff and Donovan Bennett, we will see you for Week 14.